Hi, I'm Tim and welcome to The Restoration Couple. Today we're going to be fitting the pelmet and the cornice for our kitchen units. So we put the kitchen in a couple of years ago, but one of the things we haven't got around to finishing is finishing the trim. And we've got them already. There'll be a pelmet underneath which will conceal some downlight LED strip, and then we want to finish the top with a cornice. So a couple of months ago I managed to get the other side of the kitchen completed, so I'll show you that first and then we'll come back and I'll just show you how we're going to cut and fit the moulding for all these units. We've kind of got this bank of 3 units and I fit this oak trim along the bottom, and on the reverse side of that there's an LED strip which we'll be fitting on the other units as well. If you're new to the channel and you didn't watch the kitchen renovation videos, you may be wondering how these are supported. We've actually got a welded steel frame that's concealed within these units, and that's kind of meant we didn't have to have a pillar or any way of suspending these units, so we've kind of got this floating peninsula. So on the reverse side of that, that's in the dining room end, that's also visible. So at the top and at the bottom we'll be carrying around the moulding, so it kind of frames the whole thing and looks neat from all sides. So to start with, this is the pelmet we're using. It's an oak veneered MDF, and to start with it was twice the thickness, twice the width here. And I've actually run each of the pelmet down through the table saw to rip it into half. I didn't need that depth, we didn't want it to stick down too far below the units. And just to add a little bit of complication, we've got a few of these units which are on angles. So as well as having the nice 45-degree miters on some of the corners, we're going to have a few angles that we'll need to measure, bisect and cut. You may be able to make out that I've got a section of pelmet coming along here, and I've left that 45-degree angle. That's what I put in a few months ago when we were fitting the end of the unit. Our first job will be to come off this 45-degree and go along the stretch of units, and then we need to cut our angles at the other end. So in an ideal world, if you've just got straight runs and it's all pretty simple, then you could measure up nice and accurately, do a cut list and get everything done. I'm going to do one piece at a time, and then once we've got all the pieces cut, we'll actually join them as one piece and sit it up. That way we can keep those nice tight joins. We'll measure that first stretch up to the inside corner. That's 1, 2, 2. And measure the angle, just set our angle bevel. So we've got our angle there, and of course we need to bisect this angle. We've got our angle that we took off the unit. So as an example, what we can do is place that on a piece of timber or board like here, and then we can draw our line, so we've actually got the equivalent angle on the board. So then just using a compass, like one you'd have at school, place your point on the corner there, and then draw a bit of an arc there where it intersects the line, swing it round, do the same on that line there. Then you want to move your point up to the first line, put an arc, move your point over to the second line, make an arc, and then where you've got those 2 arcs touching in the middle, that is your centre line. So we can then draw that line up there, and we know that that is the dead centre of our angle. You can then reset your angle to that line, and you know that that's the angle you want to cut. Using a piece of scrap wood, I've cut that angle now, and I can flip one piece over, and that'll give us a mock-up of our angle there. So that's one way to do it. You can take that now to the units, make sure that that's right before we start cutting into the moulding. For our first cut we need to set it to 45 degrees. Remember, dust mask if you're dealing with any timber, especially MDF. Then we'll change our saw to the new angle and make our next cut. Now remember, you can always take more material off, so always cut it a little bit heavy and then we can creep up on it. Good, so I've just been in to check that and held it up. The angles look fine. And like I said, I'm not going to fix anything until I've got all the pieces cut. So the next job is to cut the same angle again the other way, which will join up to it and carry on along that unit. And all being well, that's our next piece cut. You can buy bevels like this, which are called angle finders, and they actually will give you the center point automatically. But we'll go old school for now, because that's what we've got. So this is a situation where you definitely want to use some scrap wood to make sure you've got the right angles before we start cutting. And before we go all the way back into the kitchen to check, we can check on our lines that we've sketched out on here. So the angle works well on the units. So I'm actually going to label this up as angle 3. And go ahead and cut the rest of the pelmet, but when we come to do the cornice, I can use this as our template because it's going to be the same angle on the top of the units as it is on the bottom. So another handy tip is to get some of these heavy duty spring clamps, not the sort of cheapy ones you can get in the pound shop. You know, these are quite strong steel ones. They've also got rubber jaws on them, which means it doesn't damage the wood. They're really handy for just holding stuff to check the angles. I'm going to do the glue up out here, mainly because I didn't want to kind of damage the worktop in the kitchen at all. So I'm doing the first 4 pieces, and then we've got one piece which is a fairly straightforward piece which I'll fit in the kitchen. So here's the pelmet face down. So what you see at the top there is what will be fixed into the cupboards. So to try and clamp all this up would be a nightmare if you wanted to use wood glue or something. Because of these angles, it would be pretty tricky to do. So the best thing to use is Mitre Bond, and that's basically a super glue, kind of CA glue, and it comes in 2 parts. One's an activator, either a spray or a pen, and the other one is the actual glue itself. We do one joint at a time, the priority being that we get a nice join on the front face of the pelmet where you're going to see, and also the underneath. So that's where we'll be concentrating to make sure we get a really nice join. So I'm going to put the glue on one part, I'll put the activator on the other, and then we've got about 5 seconds to get this right. So we want to lay it on. And do the same again on here. Slide that along and then do our last piece. So you just want to kind of apply some pressure just for about 8 to 10 seconds, I'd say. And then it should be good to go. And that's probably a relatively complex glue up. Most kitchens won't have quite so many different angles. But you can see after just a minute, that's, you know, one rigid piece, and it's going to stay in one piece for us to fix it up. And again, using those little squeeze clamps or those spring clamps is going to help hold everything in position. Okay, let's test it for size. So when it comes to securing this up onto the units, we've got a few options. One would obviously be to kind of countersink and screw straight up in. You're going to end up with a visible screw head, but it would be countersunk, so that's one option. Another option is to use some fixing blocks, which I've used on the end here. Those are small plastic blocks which you fix into the side of the pelmet and then you screw the other one up. They're great for the cornice and that sort of thing, but it does mean that you won't be able to run your lighting against the back of the pelmet. So for that reason, I'm going to put some discrete screws in the top, 2 per cupboard. And they'll be very small holes and fairly discreet, but we will be able to see them. So we've got the option of either using a little plastic cap to sit in that hole, or you could put a little bit of filler in there. But there are so many other holes from the shelves and things, you probably won't notice them. So I'd rather do that than have nothing visible on the actual pelmet itself. So the plan of action is to get everything in place temporarily using clamps. Then when I'm happy, I'll drill 2 holes in each cupboard and fix straight down into the pelmet. So now I'm happy with all positions, I'm going to go along and drill using a 6mm bit first as a bit of a countersink, and that's what we could put a little plug in there if we wanted to. And I'm just going to drill, and I've done 2 per door width. And that seems to be adequate. It's holding it up nicely. I want to not use any adhesive if I can manage it, because it's easier, you know, if I ever need to move anything or take anything apart, I don't have to rip everything apart. And then I'm switching to a little 3mm bit as a pilot for the screws. And again, I'm just supporting it as I drill down. So we're now up doing the cornice. As I said, this has got a steel frame in it, but effectively this is the same as the top of the cabinet. This is the cornice we're using. Again, it's an oak, real oak veneered face MDF, and it sits with this flat section here on the top, so that's the sloped underneath you see. So one thing I didn't mention is when you're measuring up on top of the units, you need to account for the section of the cornice that's going to be on top of the unit itself. Every cornice is going to be different, but from this design, from here forwards, is meant to be visible with this section sat on top of the units. And then what you need to do is measure that, and on this cornice it's 25mm. You'd want to go around and mark all of your units 25mm in. So for example, if we're measuring this bit of plywood, we measure up to that cross section and that'll come out at 49cm. So that's just one thing to bear in mind, because when your cornice then sits on, it'll actually be sat here and here. When it comes to cutting it, especially if it's got a really nice face like this, you don't want to have any tear out, and if you're using a miter saw like this, the least tear out tends to happen on the bottom. So if you've got a flat section, it's really handy, and you can actually hold it in the position it's going to be on top of the units and cut it. Same if you're in a miter box, you could do it in the same way, but you want to make sure you just do a couple of test pieces to see, you know, where the tear out is going to be. And we're always measuring to like the internal corner. Now you can see here I've got a bit of sacrificial kind of timber on the bed of the saw, and I've put a cut through there, just because the laser is never as accurate, especially on this saw. So what I can do is then line our markup with this board, and then I know that the internal corner is going to be where the saw ends up. And then if you weren't comfortable holding it in the right angle, then you could actually screw this down to that sacrificial timber. So there's our first cut, and as you can see, no tear out, really clean cut there. Got a large framing square here, which may come in handy for the layout. Our final piece is here. The easiest way for me to do this is to kind of look at it from underneath, keeping it flat down, pressed down on the worktop. Nice and square as well. Right, hopefully this will hold together as one piece for us to carry in. It's going to be tricky to get any clamps or anything to hold it in place, so basically need to work our way around. Getting one corner lined up to start with and then working back. Measured in my 25, put some marks there, also bisected my angle there, so onto the next one. Then I can make the mark and cut it. So I've glued up the next two pieces, but I now need to attach them to the piece that's already in. And here's how it all turned out. So there we go, it's come out really nicely, really happy with how things have gone. It's a little bit tricky, and it's the first time I've done anything with sort of those bespoke angles as well. But I think it's all come together really well, and it kind of frames these units nicely. As far as the lighting goes, I'm still on the fence about whether I should install the LED strip under here. My reservation is that because we've got this black polished granite worktop, you're gonna have a mirror of everything underneath, so you'll see the bright strip in the work surface. I have fitted a downlighter in this cupboard here, which makes quite a nice feature of that corner. So what I might do is put another downlighter just in this corner, which will kind of pull a bit of light down here, but we won't have that continuous strip, which I have got on the other side of the kitchen, but because that's an oak worktop, it works a bit better. You don't see that. It kind of diffuses the light a bit better. And the match between the trim and the doors is pretty close. Remember, these are units that we reclaimed out of a house when they're being stripped out. So we've got all these real oak, solid pippy oak doors, whereas the cornice and the pelmet are both veneered MDF. But it's pretty much bang on as far as the tone. These are clear oak, so you don't have any of those knots or character in, but I think, you know, it's close enough that it all ties in. So I'll give you a little look from the other side so you can see from the dining room end, and then I'll finish with a few close-ups of the work. I hope that's been helpful. Remember, this is from a DIY perspective, so if you've got any tips or tricks that you want to help other viewers, please leave them in the discussions in the comments section below. Apart from that, thanks for watching. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.